Hello, welcome back to the second session of the block printing course. Today we're going to be looking at printing on fabric, and also we're going to look at combining block printing with collage. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at printing on fabric first, and then we're going to be looking at combining collage along with printing. So to print onto fabric, you would need to place it onto a board. We're going to be putting some tape on the top. You want to pull it quite firmly and tape along the bottom. Obviously you can print onto anything you want to, and the fabric needs to be fairly smooth. That's the main thing, but you can print on man-made, beg your pardon, and natural fabrics. And what we're going to be printing with is ordinary acrylic paint, like we did in the first session. But what we're going to do to allow it to be painted onto fabric is we're going to be using a fabric printing medium, which is easily available online. And you mix this 50-50 with paint, and then once it's dry, you fix it with an iron. Okay, so which is very simple. So great idea. So you can print obviously anything. You can print cushion covers. You can do t-shirts, all sorts of things. Or you can just do some sort of decorative pieces, and I'm just going to demonstrate in a moment printing onto the fabric to show you what we do. So you just need to mix equal amounts of the printing medium with your acrylic paint. All right, so I'm just mixing that up. It will make the paint very slightly runnier. So just make sure it's thoroughly mixed, and then you're ready to print onto fabric. Okay, so we've got our fabric taped down now, so everything's mixed up, ready to go. So I'm just going to demonstrate painting on the fabric. So it's very simple, actually. It's very similar to how we printed onto paper. However, you may find on the fabrics a little bit more patchy. You do need, your fabric needs to be fairly smooth. You don't want anything with a texture on it, obviously, otherwise that'll be very difficult to print onto. But if it's patchy, what you can do is afterwards cheat a little bit and just touch it up with a brush. That's what I've done in the past. So I'm just going to show you. Obviously this is, again, start at the top. Give it a good press down hard. See, this soaks into the fabric more than it would into paper. So I say sometimes it's a little bit patchy. There, it's a little bit patchy, but it's not too bad. Do another one. Show me slightly different colour combination this time. There, I've done one using yellow and blue. So hopefully I'll get shades of green. There you are. That one's showing a little bit clearer. But I say, if you find that you have got a patch you're not happy with, all you can do is take your brush and actually physically hand paint a section. If you've got a little bit missing, just come back in and lightly hand paint, rather than sort of spoiling your whole design. All right, so you're just basically cheating a little bit, or touching up by hand. Okay, so very similar to printing on paper, but obviously the other thing you can do with fabric is embellish it with stitch, which I'll show you now. Okay, so now I've got some examples of the block printing on fabric with stitch. This one is free machined round with some black. Deliberately done this quite scribbly and scrawly looking, sort of over and over, to give it. And this one I've actually hand stitched. Hopefully you can see that if I hold that a little bit closer to the camera. Sort of actually put lots of little stitches down here to give it a bit of tone. Okay, now this one, the next one, I've obviously got an example of free machining with a sort of turquoise on here, and this one is hand stitching with a contrasting colour. Hopefully you see that a little bit clearer if I hold that a bit closer. And another example here, this one again, I free machined around with the pink. So it's this one is again with the pink on a contrasting colour, and this one is hand stitched using contrasting colours. So hopefully if I hold that a little bit closer, that camera can focus on that and you can see that a little bit clearer. And you can also obviously, if you want to, print onto patterned fabric. That one's on patterned fabric, or you can actually paint the fabric if you want to. So this one is actually just a piece of fabric. I had some paints left over, so I watered the paints down slightly, and I've actually done a coloured background, which I will just show you printing onto a coloured background quickly now. So I've taped the fabric onto a board so it's nice and tight. Something you can do if you're a bit worried about printing on your fabric and not knowing what it's going to look like. This is just a photocopy, and I've just practiced printing on top of the photocopy, so you can think about colours and if they're going to show up nicely and what designs you want to use. So I'm just going to show you printing on the fabric quickly. So I'm going to do something similar as I did on the photocopy because I thought that looked quite nice. I'm going to just paint up this little flower. And colour in the middle. And print that here. Oops. Now that's a bit pale actually, it's not showing up very well because again, fabric, it absorbs the paint more than a paper will. So what I will do, I'll try another one, but this time I will do that in a slightly darker colour. So I will do this in, I'll paint the whole thing in blue, and then what I will do is I'll paint the centre with the pink, so that should come out in more of a purpley colour. Paint that one's pink. There we go. So hopefully this one will show up a little bit better. But what I can do with that one, I can just touch that up with a little brush. That's better, that shows up better. Touch that up with a little brush actually, which is fine. Just do a little leaf now. I'll paint the whole thing yellow. Obviously you want to do a different colour to the background, so to make sure it shows up. And I'm just going to do a little bit of blue on here. There we are, and put that on. There we are. Now the nice thing about printing on a colour background is obviously the colour, whatever's underneath, shows up really quite nicely. So that's another little thing you could try. As well as printing on pattern fabric or coloured fabric backgrounds, the other thing you can try, as we did in the first one, is actually combining two different blocks together. So here I've actually designed a block to fit into the gaps that the repeat pattern makes, which actually is quite successful. This is just a little cotton bag printed up and obviously ironed, so it's fixed, so ready to go and use. I say this technique would make really nice cushion covers, or you can do t-shirts, you can do a little border to go on the bottom of a skirt or the bottom of curtains, all sorts of things really. Or you can do little patches and then applique them onto something else, onto your textile work. So I hope you have a bit of fun with that. And what we're going to look at next is making a collage background and then making little blocks to print over the background, and we're going to be working back into them with black pen. Before we start, I'm going to show you some examples of some combinations of collage and block printing that I have done, and working back over them with pens afterwards to reinforce and embellish some of the shapes. I'm just going to flick through some of these, and you'll sort of see through here that I like to actually incorporate lots of small little block prints over on here. Okay, so building them up. This is another one here. Okay, so hopefully that gives you sort of an idea of the sorts of things we're going to be covering. And now I'm going to talk to you about making a collage. I tend to incorporate text and sort of fairly neutral papers when I'm making a collage, because remember, a lot of the colour and pattern are going to go on the top of this, so you don't want it too busy. So things like old maps, sheet music, pages from newspapers, old book pages are nice, little bits of tissue paper work quite well, some brown envelope. I've actually put a little wash of analinki or watercolours or thin washes of ink. Washes of ink would go over that if you want to, or you can just leave it as sort of black and white. The other thing you can do, which is quite useful, is you can photocopy. If you've got a printer, just photocopy your sheet, and you can then work on it a number of times with different block prints, or you could just try out ideas on here without being too worried about it if you wanted to. If you're going to print with a photocopier, try to have matte paper, not really shiny paper, because that would be more difficult to work over with. And here's another one that I've done. This is a photocopy of an original collage that I did, and you can photocopy that a number of times and then work back over the top of this to create different designs. Now when I'm working on top of the collage background, I say I like to use smaller block prints. You know, as you can see, they're quite small, and that way it allows you to build up and layer and overprint, which is quite nice. I like leaves and flowers and seed pods, the sort of thing I'm interested in. So I've made a few variations, and you can sort of combine these in different ways. So I've got some different ones here looking at flower shapes, and here are a selection of different sort of leaf shapes, which I say you can play around and you can combine them in different ways. Okay, once you're happy with your collage, I say this is actually a photocopy of the original that I'm just going to work over the top of. So that way you can do as many different designs as you like. So I'm going to now get my little leaf block here, and I'm painting this in burnt sienna colour, and I'm just going to add a little tiny touch of blue in there as well. There we are, and I'm going to put one here. Just think about this, if it comes out a little bit patchy, because we're going to work over the top with pens later, it will emphasise the shape. So if it's a little bit patchy, don't worry about it. Or you can always go back over with a paintbrush and touch it up a little bit if you need to. So I'm just going to do a couple more leaves there. A tiny touch of blue in there. A bit of contrast. And I'm going to do another one here. Yeah, and I will just do one more. Right over here. Nice thing, if you've got a photocopy, you can go over the edges, which is quite nice. So I'm going to actually do this one deliberately, hopefully coming off the edge slightly. There we are, which is, I quite like it coming off the edges, it's quite nice. Now this one's starting to get a little bit blocked up, so I'm going to give it a wipe and give that a proper clean. Oops, daisy. And then I'm going to work on top of this with some other stamps and show you what it looks like. Now, it's all the printing completed. As you can see, I've layered and built up a few different of my block prints on here, and what you do, obviously once it's dry, you can then embellish and go around and emphasize some of the shapes with just using a black marker pen. This is a black drawing pen. You can use a fine liner, you could use a gel pen, you could even use a black biro would be fine. Or obviously you could use a different colour. I just prefer black because it obviously shows up nicely. So what you're going to do is you're going to sort of emphasise some shapes. So if I just do a little bit here, and then I will hold it a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just coming in and beefing up around here. Just do this one leaf to show you. That's that one. It's up to you. You can, if you want to, you can come in and emphasize the veins on the leaves as well. It's nice to vary, have a variation of thickness of line. So what I quite like to do if I'm doing, I'm just going to bring that out a little bit. That's a bit thicker on one side. Just emphasises the curve of the shape quite nicely. So I'm just going to hold that up a little bit closer so you can see. So hopefully you can see that that actually starts to bring that shape out really nicely and emphasises it much more. So I'm going to carry on working along here, and then I'm going to come back and show you. Here's one I did earlier, and as you can see, hopefully I hold it up to the camera, that by going around using a marker pen, it shows up the detail much more. This is the original where I haven't worked back into it so much, and this is the one where it's actually got the detail showing in there. Well, this is just a reminder of some of the things that you can do with collage and block printing, and I hope you've enjoyed today's session looking at collage and block printing, and also looking at printing on fabric and embellishing with stitch. So hopefully this has shown you and given you some idea of the versatility of block printing, that you can use it in all sorts of ways. There'll be a slideshow coming up in a moment of some students' work to sort of help give you some inspiration as well. And if you do Facebook, it would be great if you could share any images of your work on our Facebook page. Please could you also complete a feedback form. This is so that we've got evidence for our funders to show that these online courses are valuable and that you're enjoying them, and details of that will be coming up. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.